Okay. Now let me share screen first. Share screen. Okay. Today we are continuing with the human characteristics. One. The uh, the one we are looking at is large brain. We have a very large brain, so let's look at the brain. Brain size. Here is a map of different animals. On the top left is a 1 cm, which is a rat, and then on the bottom right is a human, our brain. So our brain is much larger. But again, in terms of absolute size, on the diagram on the right, we have the blue whales, which have the largest brain. But when we look at its compared with its body weight, then it is not exactly very large. Elephant also have a pretty large brain, but again, compared with its size, it is not particularly large. The one which stand out is actually pointed at by the blue arrow. We our brain size relative to our body weight is especially large. So when we talk about the size of the brain, we need to take into account the body weight as well. But again, our body weights may differ because of our obesity or slimness, and therefore the range of this ratio varies quite a bit between humans. So people also suggested that when we should talk about modern humans' brain size is relative to a lean body, not a obese body. Now the cause of large brain is that the brain gobbles up a lot of energy. Brain is typically about 2% of the body weight, but uses about 20% of the oxygen supply and gets about 20% of the blood flow. So brain is a very important organ. It uses more oxygen, because it uses more oxygen, therefore it has much larger amount of blood flow. And that's exactly why chopping the head off is a very easy way to kill somebody, because you basically stop the supply of oxygen to the brain, then you will die. Large brains also means you have a large head, because the head encloses the brain, and therefore because human head is so large, then it makes childbirth difficult compared with other animals. Come on. You, oh, come on. Stupid.
I guess, Albert,
Yep.
for people to become smarter by having a bigger brain, that would be almost impossible.
But unfortunately, there's also a trend that our brain is
the-
getting smaller. That means we are getting more stupid.
The thing is not the size of the brain, it's the amount of the brain that is used. I'm not sure of the exact figures, but I remember reading ages and ages ago that the average person uses less than 10% of their brain. And even somebody like Einstein was using only about 80% of his brain.
Hey,
quite-
why am I missing so much of the display? Okay, let's go back to here. Why I started right, jump to the bottom.
Yeah, you've gone too far.
I got too far. Okay, this one, brain size, and then somehow you jump to the very end. Okay, let's go back to here. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Don't worry.
Okay, go back to the slide. From early primates to Homo sapien, our brain get progressively larger. So we started with about 600 cubic centimeters, up to now about 1,400. But among all the Homo, actually is the Neanderthals. They have a much larger brain than us. Somehow our brain decreased in size. So the increase in brain size stopped with the Neanderthals. Since then, the average brain size has been shrinking over the past 28,000 years. The kernel capacity had decreased from around 1,550 centimeters cubic centimeter to around 1,440 in males. Women's head is a little bit smaller compared with men, but but we don't know why humans' brain have been shrinking. That's another very interesting thing we need to understand by the scientists, but not me, of course.
This gets back to what I was saying before. It's not the size of the brain, it's the amount of the brain
That's being used.
that is being used. And I mean, many people will say, look, this is the future, that we start using more of our brain and therefore are able to do things that we can't do now.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't agree with that one. I think in the future,
don't?
it's not because our brain getting more used. It's because we can connect to external memory processing things so that we don't need to use our brain. We can use artificial intelligence and so forth. So I think we are going to be connected either through the brain or somehow to better technology to process information. But anyway, the diagram you're seeing is the change of brain size during our life. So it go up to about more than 86 years old. So the horizontal axis is the age, and the vertical axis is the weight. So it seems that we peak at around the late teens. Once we enter into the 20s, then our brain size started to drop off progressively. So again, this is very interesting. We suppose that the older we are, the better we can think and the better we can use our brain. But our brain size is actually dropping as we get older.
One of the remarkable things, Albert, is the ability of the brain to, where there's damage, to reconnect in a different pathway, the synapses to connect and grow.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would happen in animals. Do you know that answer?
I think the animals also have this. The brain is pretty, what they call it is not plastic. Is that right?
Plastic, yeah.
Yeah, our brain is pretty plastic. That means we can actually modify the functions of the brain. If one part of the brain is damaged, then other parts will be adopted to take over. So that is a quite interesting phenomena, and I'm not a brain scientist, so I don't know what's the mechanism involved in it. But again, for people, for example, who have visual disability, for example, blind, then their audio capacity, the audio abilities, is actually can be enhanced because they are blind. Because some part of the visual part of the brain is being used by the audio parts to help process information, so they have a much better audio abilities. I think I saw a video whereby human radar, the bats use sound to navigate, so they will start a sound, and the sound bounces off from different surfaces, and then from that they can navigate. And for the people who are blind from birth, some of them also develop that ability. They can make a click sound, and then they can hear the sound, and then is able to recognize the surrounding around them.
I've seen a demonstration of that, Albert.
Yeah.
On a particular show, yes.
To me, it's very surprising. I really can't understand why they can do that, but somehow it seems they can, and then it is pretty easy to learn it from as well. So that's another very interesting thing as well. Okay, moving on. Here is the brain body to mass ratio on the left. So for small ants, their brain to body ratio is only 1.7. The larger the animals, it seems the ratio start decreasing. We humans is among we are much heavier than cats and dogs, etc. But our brain relatively is in their range, even in the range of a mouse. So again, that's demonstrate that we have a much higher brain to body ratio, smaller, put it that way.
The thing that absolutely intrigues me about that graph is that everything is so very similar, that all the examples you've got there range between 1.1 and 1.6 only, which is a very small range.
No, it's not 0.6. That's a ratio, 1 to 7, and then 1 to 2,798 down at the bottom.
I beg your pardon. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a ratio. It's a ratio.
Yeah.
So look
the answer the top box.
Yeah, looking at that ratio.
No, look, I beg your pardon.
No problem. It's good that some Susan can point you out to the right direction. That will make the discussion much easier. So
just had my cataracts done.
So small mammals. Now we have to remember that the brain is more than just cognitive. The brain also controls some of our automatic functions, like the heartbeats, like the regulation of our body temperature, and so forth. So larger animals, they will have a larger part of the brain devoted to that automatic functions, like heartbeat, sweating and running, all these things. And so obviously the larger the animal, the more you need the brain to do these regulation functions. And therefore the smaller the animals, like ants, obviously they don't need that much amount of control to their different muscles and so forth, and therefore they don't need that part that as large. So,
Uh,
so this is
but
where, yeah.
do you know that why the ant doesn't need that much of a brain, but they still can communicate one to each other and telling their colleagues where to go and to get the things.
Yeah, well, it seems that for ants they use some kind of smell, I suppose.
I know it's not that it is they have a true antenna
Okay,
on their
and that is how they
and,
communicate. The antennas
and
use.
that's why that's correct because they have some research that they are using the wavelength to communicate to one which is far away. You can see that so if there is a switch in your somewhere in the corner, they can communicate it, and then those will be just queuing and then coming to that direction.
Yeah.
But that is one thing, and then human being, there's also have been testing for the twins. They are testing the twins that one is seeing the one, the other can do the communicated, and they also can do the drawing the same pictures.
Yeah.
And that is something which have been done. And as far as we Chinese also have been thinking about people who is full of imagination, and they will be developed much better. And then we always escape saying, you are not using your back brain to think about. And so that is a very important part which is developed. So maybe the density is quite different. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. So moving on. As I said, large animals need more nuance to represent their own bodies and control specific muscles, and therefore there is a relatively necessity of a larger brain for larger animals. So here, because of that, so when we talk about the brain to body mass ratio, it's not a very simple factor. We need to take into other accounts as well. Probably that also may be one reason why humans level off their physical abilities after about 20 years old, because I think more and more of the brain is devoted to cognitive and reducing the amount of muscle control and so forth. I don't know, but the picture just we see here is a very interesting picture that we need somehow to explain this, but I don't have an explanation. So it is a tendency for larger animals to get a smaller brain to body mass ratio, as explained before. One explanation could be as the animal's brain gets larger, the size of the neuron cells remains the same, and therefore more nerve cells can cause the brain to increase in size to a lesser degree. Then again, the brain is still a very strange organ to us. As I said, also point out, the brain to body size ratio also depends on whether the person is overweight or underweight and so forth. So they are talking about lean body weight to brain ratio rather than just body weight to brain ratios. Some animals, typically those have to stay in the cold regions, will have a lot of body fats, and that also might changes the equation. So a simple looking at the brain to body ratio obviously might need to be reconsidered. Okay, this is the representation. Brain is hungry. So next time we'll have to answer the question, how can human maintain such a large brain? And our brain size over the years increases during the rapid climate change. You see the climate change in the colored region oscillates in a much larger amplitude than before. That means the weather changes is huge. Large climate change obviously require better cognitive skill to adapt to, and therefore we see the brain size growing up almost in accordance with the amplitude of the climate fluctuations. The climate fluctuations, larger the climate fluctuations, it seems that some animals' brain actually gets much larger in order to adapt. But interestingly, the brain size is also deviate quite a bit. Probably that is because the lack of fossil records. So on the right of the color column on the bottom, the green size, we see the brain sizes are much closer. I think what we should be looking at is the amplitude, the difference between the largest and the smallest brain. It seems that they are linked to the temperature weather fluctuations. The larger the fluctuations, it seems that it cater for brains to go larger. And maybe the exception of some of those smaller brains comes from organisms which survive very well in extreme weathers, and therefore their brain doesn't need to accommodate as much. Here is the diagram showing different kinds of human, the brain size. In particular, we see that about 0.2 million years ago, so it's about 200,000 years ago, the Neanderthals has the largest brain, average at 1,500 centimeters. Ours now is reduced to about 1,300. But again, interestingly, how can we compete better than the Neanderthals? We eventually cause them to all extinct. So obviously we are better competitors. But what is the reason why we compete better than them? So that is another very interesting question we need to look at. From the fossil records, there are thousands of fossils, but unfortunately most are fragmentary. So we just get a small section of it. So it is very difficult to actually compare. A complete gout or a skeleton are very rare. Like another interesting thing is look at how the brains grow. On the left is apes. On the right is human. We know that the yellow part is where the brain grows very rapidly, and then the blue part is the brain grows a little bit slower but still growing, and then eventually in the brown part we see that the brain actually almost stops. For apes, their most rapid growth is before they were born, and then after that they enter into a slower growing period. Whereas for human, that continues to almost 2 years old. So that is a difference between human and apes. Obviously, the larger brains means you can store more information, collect more information, process more information, and be able to deliver the output in split seconds. But again, that is also not exactly true. we have videos showing some gorillas and so forth have a much better memory than we are. But we obviously can solve problem and create abstract ideas and images and much more. Okay, the course we have covered that already. And that's the presentation. Now we can have our discussion.
Oh,
Okay, stop sharing.
Please, sir, can I talk first?
Yes, please. Yes, Susan.
You know, there has been heaps of research on this. My understanding is that the amount of convolutions in the brain contributes to the ability of the brain. So on your slide where the dolphin had the larger brain by weight, it showed the dolphin as having fewer convolutions on the surface. So less surface area means less intellectual activity, as I understand it. But the real question I want to ask is, where do the emotions come into this?
The emotion is, now we can see some of the brains light up when we have emotions
Okay.
through what they call functional MRI. So you put somebody into a MRI machine, have it turn on, and then show them some emotional images, for example. Then we will see their brains, different part of the brains light up. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, isn't this the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain? Emotions are on one side of the brain, and I'm not sure which it is, but and normal functions on the other side of the brain.
No, I saw Vivi shaking her head.
You're shaking your head, Valerie.
no, that's not correct.
No?
No. That's pop psychology.
Yeah, that's popular, but it's not actually completely correct.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Our brain is also interesting. Another aspect is that our brain isn't duplicating the other half of the brain. So our two halves behave differently under different situations. Whereas a lot of animals, both halves are duplicates. So they're almost symmetrical. So that means, although maybe that's another evolution that we are heading on, is our brain is getting more and more specialized on each half, and therefore we don't need so much duplication, and therefore our brain is shrinking, while our cognitive ability is not shrinking. I still suppose we are smarter than our parents, who are smarter than their parents. Again, Vivi is shaking her head.
Every person thinks that. Every youngster thinks that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
It's more likely that it's going the other way because we're using technology to do a lot of mundane thinking for us, and we're not practicing enough to make the connections as efficient.
Absolutely. Yes.
You see that, Valerie, when you buy something before the cash registers in shops was good, they got to add something up. They can't do it up here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think we might have passed the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Well,
they say that they're learning other things. They're using their brains in other ways. I'm not sure whether that's true, good, or imagined.
Yeah. There's a chap in Melbourne called David Astle who's very smart on doing crosswords. You've probably heard of him. They put him in an MRI machine and gave him tasks to do to see what part of the brain was working. But he's like a walking encyclopedia with words and history and derivatives.
Absolutely. Have you ever watched him in Letters and Numbers?
It's a regular one of mine. I concentrate on
and mine.
And to do them in my head.
I must admit the main reason that one of the reasons I watch Letters and Numbers is to look at Lily Serner, who is stunningly beautiful. But anyway,
Amazing.
You-
They must have,
you can-
they must have been so excited when they found a mathematical genius who was a beautiful woman.
Ah,
Yeah.
Well, she's not the only one. There's one in the UK.
Yeah.
She's not as
Right.
good.
Might
but
be
what
something.
surprises me is that she hasn't done more television. But anyway, we're
We don't know
digressing.
what she does.
Well, she has not a lot, but she has done
Not-
other.
A few little cooking shows and things, but not much.
No,
she
she
did
didn't.
something on she did something on algorithms one time.
That was a one-off.
Almost know what I almost understood what she was saying. But you,
But
And-
Albert, just going back to the brain, I didn't know what you said about many animal brains. The left and right hand side of the brain are a duplicate. So I can certainly see why the human brain would have a huge advantage if the two halves are more specialist. So maybe that also goes back to saying, why did humans survive when Neanderthals died out? That the brain had begun this specialization and gave so much more capacity to Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
The one brain.
Albert, what do you think us eating meat contributed to us having enough time, because we could take energy in so much more quickly, to develop our brain?
Yeah, that is the most important reason is the humans started cooking. Of course, now, when we started cooking, we solved two problems. One is we have access to some food which was previously poisonous. By cooking it, it becomes edible, like a lot of the roots. So that means we don't have to spend a lot of time finding food. We have some food which is readily available only to us, reserved. And the second
One other
reason,
thing we shouldn't forget, the primitives didn't think, or the primitives thought that the body was controlled not by the brain but by the heart. And it's only in the last couple of thousand years that we've realised the importance of the
well,
brain.
I think that's
But
easily understood.
we've still got so many sayings and expressions which go back to believing that everything comes from the heart. I mean, the one I'm thinking at the moment is to tell somebody that they're heartless.
Yeah.
Not brainless.
He
but
hasn't got the
heartless.
ticker for it. That's what they say in politics. No
Yeah,
ticker.
yeah,
no heart.
yeah.
is
That's
different to
right.
brainless. Heartless is different to brainless. If you're heartless, you've got no feelings. If you're brainless, you're not thinking. You think about it. Well, that's
Well,
how
I think this is very easy to understand that we put more emphasis in the heart at the beginning, because we know that when we are running, when we are excited, and so our heart beats faster. That is something we can realize, and therefore we will link that to yes, our heart is one of the most important organ to ourselves. So I think, but later on we started to understand by the anatomy that the brain actually functions. When your brain is dead, you are dead. Whereas your heart still is dead, we can now replace it with another artificial heart.
Yes, yes.
So the saying that the love comes from the heart is that could be questioned. There'd be different opinions then.
The heart's just a muscle for pumping blood around you.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
And Albert, what you said on cooking food, that then must have been an aid to prevent different diseases, because if it could have had organisms that would affect the health, well, then they're killed.
Yeah. Well, our life expectancy is much better than our ancestors. Our life expectancy has been increasing, and increasing much faster than our body can support naturally. So we got all kind of cancer and so forth. I think the situation like having a cancer, that will today you get cured, and then you can still live for another 10 or 20 years. In the old days, you're gone.
Yeah.
Getting back to what you said, Cyril, about cooking food, I think that it's probable, and there are so many legends about the first cooking of food being accidental, that somebody set fire to the barn where the animals were, and suddenly found that the burnt animals tasted better than raw animals. And as I said, to me, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think taste is acquired. So I will suspect for the early humans, they are forced to eat cooked food rather than intentionally looking for cooked food. But later on, they find that, well, cooking do have its advantages, and therefore it becomes some of the acquired taste. I don't know about you. Does anybody like bitter melon? Yeah, the Chinese, this is an acquired taste. If you haven't get used to it in your younger age, you will never fall in love with it. But if you acquire that taste, then it will last. Another example is hot food.
Absolutely. I was thinking that I love my chilies, and but it's an acquired taste.
Yeah.
Can we get as much protein out of uncooked meat as cooked meat? Is there a difference?
Yes, there's a difference. We get much more protein from cooked as well, because
our digestive system is that of a vegetarian. We've superimposed eating meat onto it, and to make it work efficiently, we must cook the meat.
Well, at the moment, especially for us, our biomeans, they call biomean, the bacteria in our guts, has been adapted to eating cooked meat, cooked food.
And don't forget the animals which live with humans, particularly cats and dogs, through humanity, has also acquired a taste for cooked meat.
Yeah. Well, my dog is still prefer eating raw.
Yes, so same as mine. But I think for humans, it's interesting because so much of the world, humans are still vegetarian, most of them, and meat is just an occasional add-in to their diet. So they still manage, because of agriculture, that thing that has enslaved us all, because of agriculture, they still have spare time to develop their brain.
Yeah.
But until recently, the not eating cooked or not eating meat was a matter of economy. That people couldn't afford meat, but could afford vegetables.
I agree.
And that's why, look, and things change. Our age, we would all remember when we were growing up, when chicken was a great luxury that you had once a week for Sunday lunch.
Oh, you are so rich. We have chicken once a year.
Once a year. Once a year, when you visited Nana, and they cut off the head and pluck the feathers.
Yeah.
Talking about the luxury on the meat. So if you have been in the World War II at the place where we couldn't have anything to eat, and sometimes we still have to eat from the grasses. We have the skin of the woods. And then
anyone ever read The Good Earth? Did anyone ever read that book?
We plant the potato, sweet potato, and so on. And occasionally, if we have rice It seems like heaven. We are the emperors.
Nice. Okay.
Nothing more than anything else. So we still eat very, very on the potatoes.
Look, you're talking about food during the war, and
Yeah, just for yes, but that's why at that people at that times, and in the certain area, and that if you have nothing can be it, and that is the only thing so you can survive.
but in Australia and the Australian Army, you had completely different diets. Now, I grew up with a story. A female friend of my mother's used to tell the story. Her husband was coming home on leave from the army, and she thought she'd buy the greatest luxury, something that was very hard to get in Australia, which happened to be sardines. And she had the sardines out on the table for Lou, her husband, and he took one look at the sardines and said, "Oh no, not sardines again." The reason sardines were rare in Australia was they were all being sent over to the army. So as I said, completely different diets.
Yeah.
We're constantly told now that with our diets to eat less meat, we'd be better off.
Yeah.
But probably the volume of meat that we might use doesn't suit an older body. And a second thing I've been told doing a health course for seniors is that when we were younger, we were more active and we ate an amount of food for the size of our body that we thought was good for us. And what happens then? We retire, we're less active because of whatever, and we eat, most of us will eat the same amount, and therefore that's more food going in, and that's why we get the rotund bellies, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And part of that then is not perhaps doing exercise at the same level, and doing and losing that exercise ability, we lose strength in the upper body. The muscles don't develop, only in the legs, they're maintained, but we're eating that same amount, which means we create more fat again, unneeded energy, we store it. So there's messages there, but there's a whole range on the size of bodies and activity and all that sort of thing.
And Cyril, if you join my Nordic walking group, you'll use your upper arms.
Oh, would you? Ah, very good.
I'd like to ask a question. We were talking about how food helps the brain develop. What happens with young people or children who are growing up during a war or famine and aren't getting enough proper food? Does that arrest their development to a great degree, or can they make up for it as they get older by eating and getting a better education? Has anyone ever done tests on that?
No, but I have seen
Dutch children, because the Dutch went through a famine during the war when the Nazis down. They were helping people they shouldn't have been.
Yes.
They restricted the food supply to Holland, and there's been a study done of the babies born from that famine time. But being without food isn't as bad as being without mental stimulation as the children were in the Romanian orphanages. That effect on their brain development was more than the being without food in
Okay.
Some years back, I heard of a study done that where grandparents suffered food deprivation for whatever circumstance, it didn't necessarily affect their children, but the grandchildren got what the grandparents had. They were not quite as normal as the parents were, their parents. So it jumped a generation and had the effect in the genes, etc.
But I
Certainly
think
if you're overfed as a baby, and a lot of our babies that are not breastfed are overfed because they use a cow's milk derivative, which is highly fatty, they will have bigger fat cells and always spool away more fat on their bodies than people that are fed human milk, for instance, which isn't as fatty. So it certainly has an effect on your whole physiology.
I reckon, yes. That makes sense.
well, I grew up I don't have sufficient nutrients for myself until probably in the universities. So when I enter universities, my weight at that time is 99 pounds. So 40
kilos.
40 kilos.
Mm.
So I was very, very much underweight when I entered universities.
I reckon.
Mm.
Yeah,
I'd like to be 40 kilos.
that,
Oh, you would not. Why would
only
you?
about 6 stone.
You wouldn't have the energy then, Valerie.
Well, it doesn't affect my energy. I still quite active, although I
Yes.
don't play sports.
Being underweight's actually very good for you.
Yeah.
We're meant to starve. We're built to starve.
You want to live longer, be hungry all the time.
Be hungry. And your brain works better when you're hungry. For obvious
I'm
reasons.
not being hungry. You've got to
You
get
won't
someplace.
like it because you're not meant to like it. But if you're hungry, your brain will work harder.
Yeah, because when you are hungry, you need to look for food. And that's why your brain is power up and to say,
Your weight,
food,
powder.
food,
It
find
goes
food.
looking for food in the
When
refrigerator.
you're satiated, your brain doesn't need to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you are not hungry, your brain doesn't need to work. That also develops another recreational things. I think all the arts comes from when you have too much time in hand. You start drawing, you start making different kinds of things. So the artistic actually is a way of occupying some of the time available to you.
Mm.
But,
Or you binge watch TV.
or yeah, or drinking.
But whatever you say, let's face it, food is a great pleasure in life.
Oh, is it?
Oh, yeah,
Especially
yeah.
chocolate.
It is.
Oh, any nice food, any food that you like. And it's got to be good for you if it's giving you good feelings. That's my.
Yeah, well,
I'll remember that, Gwen.
Hold on to that order to get your next piece of chocolate.
well,
Yes.
because food is very important. So you have to like food. If we don't like food, we won't survive.
Well, that's true.
So
But
like
what about,
too much.
no, I know someone that the more exercise, he absolutely could not get enough food into him. And this is on a long distance walk. I've never seen anyone put so much food away.
Mm.
And at the same time, the theory goes that if you're really thin, you're not going to really survive. If you've got that sort of metabolism, you're not going to survive as well in a drought situation as someone who's able to put on weight.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
All of that.
Mm.
Mm.
you're talking about, sorry, you go.
I was going to say, in fact, your body naturally stores away fat for the starvation that's coming. The only
Yes,
fact is that
Absolutely.
starvation
Well, this person can put on any weight. I've never seen a person eat so much food and lose weight.
Who's that?
Oh, it's gone now anyway.
I think
Ah,
UVA
right.
should
It's
start
fella,
a,
it's a bushwalker. He used to go long distance walks.
What you're saying reminds me of a joke, and I apologise beforehand. It is a little bit naughty. But there's a parallel universe. And in the parallel universe, boy and girl go into the Grand Hotel and into the Grand Brothel with the big chandelier, and they do what you do in brothels, and then the man turns to the woman and says, "Hey, when we're finished here, let's go up to my room and I'll give you a sausage."
well, food has always been a way of showing love.
Yeah.
So food is very, very much linked to that as well.
Yeah, well,
If I give you food, it's showing that I can support you and you can come with me and be dependent. I can feed you.
And we will talk about cooking next time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, well, look, because after all, this is answer the question how we can support such a large brain comparatively.
A couple of you there, if you'll excuse me, Albert, a couple of you expressed an interest you like letters and numbers.
Yes.
I wanted to run a letters and numbers class where we gave ourselves a bit, I've got some tapes of it that I bought, and you give yourself more than the 30 seconds, perhaps, to find the words.
That'd be a good
The maths is pretty easy, so you probably wouldn't need more than 30 seconds for that. But,
No.
you know, we could have a little game every week of letters and numbers.
Oh, yeah.
And take an hour to have it instead of the 30 minutes allowed. You know what I mean? And have fun doing it. Even if you've seen the shows, which I think we've all now seen them, you don't remember enough for it to help you much, if you know what
Well,
I mean.
it's on its third repeat at the
Yes.
moment. Yes.
And it's better than the English one, which they occasionally drop
Oh,
into.
Oh,
look,
they carry on too much over there. I don't want.
They haven't got
8 out of 10 cats love Countdown. That,
yeah,
oh, look,
no.
they can't
that
make up
one.
their mind whether it's a panel show or pure comedy. That's the
But
problem.
there is an English letters and numbers on which ours was based, but our Lily and our David are so much better than their equivalent.
Yes, but their
I'm
program,
not biased.
their program was
No.
not called Letters and Numbers. It was called Countdown.
Yeah, we couldn't.
And
yeah,
when
that's
when
right.
Countdown came to Australia, we had to find a new name because we'd already used the name Countdown for the pop music show.
Yeah. But anyway, if you're interested in that, let me know because I've got my email there. Because Betty says they already have a quiz. They already have a quiz thing, so she always never enthusiastic to have it. But I thought it could have been a fun thing to do for a term. You know, where we played them on the TV, the big TV, and we just paused them, and we'd pause them longer than they did. And give
Oh, I
our
see. Yeah. Yeah.
We can do that on Zoom as well. So while we are still locked at home, then you just using some shared screen with your video,
Yeah.
and then you can.
I just got CDs, so I guess you could feed those on.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't have a CD player in my computer though anymore. Only the old.
Well, you
computer.
need to grab the videos
to
out from the
download.
CD, and then you can do it wherever you like.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, another idea just popped up into my mind is that we will be looking at food shortages due to the COVID-19.
Oh yes, yes, that'll
worldwide.
be interesting coming up.
Yeah, so I think UVA should start looking at how to revitalize our backyards and front gardens into food production.
Yeah.
I would be.
KFC are experimenting. They take some cells from a chicken, grow it in a culture, and do it with other processes, and then they 3D print the whatever's there, make layers. Then they add things to make it have a taste rather than tasteless, and call them chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
But I think we can do better than that. Our front garden being a lawn is a waste.
I haven't got a lawn, I've got stones. What about your maggots? They might come into play at last, Albert.
What again?
Your maggots.
Maggots? Oh,
Yes, feeding chooks on maggots.
yeah. Well, I can start a course on growing maggots.
This is a really high quality protein.
Yeah, and then you know what? China started to farming cockroaches
Yeah, I heard of that. Yeah, not
because
for me.
cockroach eat anything, and the cockroaches are very medicinal, so they can use it as a medicine.
My brain would not allow me.
No.
They won't
Yeah.
know.
Plenty in Melbourne.
But of course, when you're talking about eating foods like that, the big thing is whether you know what you're eating or
Yeah.
not.
Yes.
For example, the one of the worms that was used to process the agricultural waste in the market are actually roast, grind up as powder, and sold it to friends, and they put it into their bread. So a lot of bakery in France is actually using protein powder made from insects from China's wet markets. Think about that, okay?
They're
So,
never going to denude the world of insects, are we? Because they're adding them to our food chain.
well, the
Yeah,
insects
they
are
get-
getting into our food chain, no doubts. But it's only whether it is the first generation insects or the second generation insects. For example, if I grow nuggets for chicken, and the chickens are fed with nuggets, then we are eating second generation nuggets because it goes through the chicken before we eat them. So
It's converted.
yeah, food is all like that. Nature convert everything. So when we die, our body go back being eaten by the microorganisms, and then eventually feed back into the soil, and some tree grew on it, and then some animal eat the trees or the grass, and then we eat them, and then it's a whole circle round. So nature recycle everything.
Anyway, Albert, we better let you go and set up
The next one.
China Today, and I'll see you, if not others, I'll see you in China Today.
Okay.
Thank you, Albert.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Albert,
Thank
Yeah.
Albert.
I'll see you next week, Albert.
You okay?
Albert.
yeah.
Next week I'll have an apology. I've got a friend died. His funeral's on. He didn't make it to only to 98 and a half. So I'll see you then. That's the last week, and then there's the holidays, I think. So I'll see you after the holidays,
Okay.
everyone.
Okay.
All the best for the next month.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Thanks very
See you.
much.
Bye.